cheating husband tries to evict me for his mistress, so I legally seize his entire $10 million company and leave him homeless. My arrogant husband thought he could cheat on me with his young secretary, serve me divorce papers on my birthday, and kick me out of our luxury house. My cheating husband thought he could blindside me with divorce papers and kick me out of our luxury home so his 22-year-old secretary could move in. He smugly told me I had exactly 30 days to pack my bags and leave with nothing. But he completely forgot one massive, life-ruining detail from our wedding day 10 years ago. My incredibly wealthy father secretly owns the deed to our estate, and I own 51% of his supposedly self-made tech company. Here is the ultimate story of how I played the devastated wife for a month, secretly gathered my corporate lawyers, and legally destroyed his entire life, leaving him homeless, bankrupt, and completely alone. For some context, Mark and I met in college when he was completely broke. He had huge ambitions but zero capital. I came from a very wealthy family, but I never flaunted it. I wanted us to build a life together based on love, not my trust fund. When Mark wanted to start a software company, he couldn't get a bank loan. My father offered to provide the $2 million seed money, but my dad is a ruthless businessman. He made Mark sign a massive stack of contracts. The most important clauses were that my father's holding company would retain 51% of the voting shares, and the house we lived in would remain in a trust under my name. Mark was so eager for the money that he barely read the fine print. He signed everything, and over the next 10 years his company exploded in value. It is now worth over $10 million. As Mark became wealthy and successful, he changed. He started wearing expensive suits, buying sports cars, and treating me like an employee rather than his partner. I had spent a decade managing his household, doing all his administrative work, and supporting him, but suddenly I wasn't good enough for his new elite lifestyle. The red flags started showing up about 6 months ago. He was coming home at 3 a.m, smelling like expensive perfume. He changed his phone password and started taking urgent business trips every weekend. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I hired one of the best private investigators in the state. Within 2 weeks, I had a massive file of high-definition photos, hotel receipts, and text messages proving he was having a full-blown affair with his new secretary, Chloe. She was barely out of college, and he was buying her designer bags with company funds. I was heartbroken, but the sadness quickly turned into absolute cold rage. I decided I wasn't just going to divorce him, I was going to ruin him. I kept my mouth shut and acted perfectly normal. Then on the morning of my 35th birthday, Mark walked into the kitchen, threw a manila envelope on the counter, and told me he was filing for divorce. He stood there with a disgusting smirk on his face, and said he had already transferred most of the joint funds into a private offshore account. He told me that Chloe was moving in at the end of the month, and since his name was on the mortgage documents he signed years ago, I had to leave. He actually laughed and told me I should have gotten a prenup. He was so blinded by his own arrogance that he had completely forgotten the corporate structure my father set up a decade ago. I started crying perfectly fake tears, begged him to reconsider, and ran out of the house. I drove straight to my father's corporate law firm. We spent the next 3 weeks preparing a legal strike so devastating that it would be taught in law schools. We audited the company's financials and found out Mark had been using company money to fund his affair, which was a direct violation of his fiduciary duty to the shareholders. Because I owned 51% of the shares through the family trust, I had the power to call an emergency board meeting. The trap was set. On the day Mark was planning to officially announce his new relationship to the company, I walk deep into the executive boardroom, flanked by my father and 3 incredibly expensive corporate sharks. Mark looked confused and asked what I was doing there. I didn't say a word. I just slid a massive binder across the long mahogany table. It contained the original contracts he signed 10 years ago, the private investigator's photos, and the financial audit proving he was embezzling money for his mistress. My lawyer calmly informed the rest of the board that Mark was officially being terminated as CEO, effective immediately, for gross misconduct. Mark started screaming, threatening to sue everyone in the room, claiming it was his company. That is when my lawyer pulled out the deed to the house. He handed it to Mark and told him that not only was he fired and his shares frozen pending a criminal investigation, but he also had exactly 1 hour to vacate my property before the police would be called for trespassing. The color completely drained from his face. He fell to his knees, literally begging me to stop, crying that he was sorry, and that Chloe meant nothing to him. I just leaned over, looked him dead in the eyes, and wished him a happy birthday. By the end of the day, he was escorted out of the building by security. When Chloe found out he was suddenly broke, unemployed, and facing potential jail time for embezzlement, she immediately dumped him and blocked his number. He tried to move back into his parents' basement, but they refused to take him in after learning what he did to me. Today, my ex-husband works as a cashier at a local hardware store just to pay his legal fees, while I recently sold the software company for a massive profit. I am currently sitting on a beach in the Maldives, sipping a cocktail and enjoying my early retirement.